I have this thing, people know I have this thing. I have to stay calm.
Listen to me. I am an immigrant. I'm speaking from personal experience.
Get the hell out.
I don't even like... I should get the hell out?
Yes.
Why?
I don't want you here.
I think you could say I'm a fascist.
Yeah, I am.
Hey, I'm Sasan, and I'm a debate coach. I've been doing that for more than 10 years. I've coached several hundreds of students. My work's been featured in a few cool places. And for the past 6 years, I've been running a small YouTube channel with a couple friends of mine that make educational videos for debate competitors in like high school and college academic debate. But debate's a universally important thing to understand, and there's a lot of public interest in not just the things we debate, but how we debate them. And I haven't seen a lot of resources like this for a general audience, so that's what this is. Today we're starting with part 1 of maybe 3 or 4 parts on a Jubilee video that came out recently with Mehdi Hasan debating 20 far-right conservatives about progressive ideas.
Today I'm surrounded by 20 far-right conservatives.
In this first part, we're going to take a look at Jubilee's surrounded format and how that informs the strategies that the debaters are incentivized or maybe even required to use in order to be successful in this format. In later parts, we'll do things like break down Mehdi's claims. We'll take a look at what makes a strong argument and apply that to a few of the arguments in the debate, and maybe we'll go debater by debater and kind of assess how well they do. These videos aren't about endorsing a side politically or saying which side most agrees with my beliefs. I have beliefs, and I'm not going to try to hide them like they're a secret, but the educational value in something like this is in taking a look at what the debaters' goals are, what they're doing to try to achieve those goals, and how effective that is. Along the way, we'll cover some concepts that are probably going to be new to you. In communication, it's not always what you say, but how you say it that conveys its own kind of message. And one phrase we use in communication theory is the medium is the message. What that basically argues is that a Mehdi Hasan Jubilee surrounded video will have more in common in terms of its messaging to another Jubilee surrounded video with some other topic and some other set of participants than it has in common with Mehdi Hasan debating a similar topic at an Oxford debate, or talking about it on a talk show, or in a direct one-on-one conversation. That's because the Jubilee surrounded video incentivizes and rewards certain kinds of behaviors, and those behaviors communicate a consistent message, regardless of the topic. That's why in a lot of high-level competitive debates in college and high school in the United States, it's not uncommon for debaters to debate how the debate is being had as much or more than the actual topic they're supposed to be discussing.
But I think you've conceded that he is cracking down on free speech, which is the First Amendment. So he is defying the Constitution. So it's a pleasure to be in agreement with you, sir.
The first question we have to ask to understand what our strategy should be in a debate is, what does it mean to win this debate? In other words, what is the win condition? A win condition in any competitive game is the outcome that determines a winner. So famously, chess has the win condition of a checkmate. It's not actually the only win condition of chess. Your opponent can resign, they can lose on time. Sometimes you might be incentivized to go for a draw. But generally speaking, the rules of chess say this is how all the pieces move, and this is what a checkmate is. And all of the other strategic concepts, right, in terms of what good openings are or the relative value of the pieces, naturally emerge from that set of rules. So you can mathematically demonstrate that, generally speaking, a knight is worth about the same as 3 pawns. A bishop is worth about the same as a knight. A rook is worth about the same as 2 knights or 2 bishops or some combination of that, right? It's not universally the case in every single situation, but generally speaking, in terms of chess strategy, that starts to emerge. Now, what would happen if we changed the rules of debate and we said, Now you can only get a checkmate if you're using a knight. All of a sudden, knights become way more valuable than they were before, and all of our current openings and whatever, they might no longer serve us because maybe they frequently sacrifice a knight, and that really diminishes your chances of winning. Debate isn't different. We have to understand what constitutes winning in order to understand what strategy we should be trying to use or what we should be looking at to determine if someone did a good job. Think of it this way. A trial lawyer can be said to be doing debate. A political candidate can be said to be doing debate. Two couples having a fight can be said to be having a debate. But what you should do in these three scenarios are all very different from each other. The Jubilee Surrounded videos don't have judges. In academic debate, what a judge is that it's one person, sometimes a small panel of people, who sit in the room, watch the debate, and choose a winner at the end. So the win condition is whoever can convince Paul Villa to circle their name on the ballot. Other debate formats like the Intelligence Squared debates or the Monk debates will have an audience that collectively act as a judge. They will poll the audience before the debate starts. They'll poll them again after the debate is over, and then whoever swung the most people over to their side is the winner. A couple years ago, I was a guest on Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, after he didn't do so well in a Monk debate.
Sasan is 30-something, extroverted, charismatic. In the John Grisham version of his life, he would be a trial lawyer who would win a $10 billion verdict from the jury in Mississippi.
And one of the things that he said while we were talking about this was, I still think I won that debate, which we had to explain was not a valid concept because the win condition is who the audience voted for. And the audience didn't vote for you. And so by definition, you didn't win. But something like Jubilee doesn't really work that way because there is no judge. It's much more similar to a political debate. Political debates are adversarial. You have an opponent, but they're not zero-sum. What that means is that we don't have this explicit concept of a winner and a loser of the debate. What you're trying to accomplish is just generally benefiting from having done the debate. And it can be hard to know when that's happened. And you can both benefit from doing the debate, or everyone can be worse off because they were in the debate. The debate becomes a series of clips and sound bites that live their own lives outside of the room that they took place in. And it's hard to say in the long run what's going to age the best or what's going to create the best impression. Take this guy, for example. He lost his job pretty quickly after the Jubilee video came out, but he also got a bunch of exposure, and now there's like a fundraiser for him, and he's probably going to be able to spin this into becoming some sort of right-wing media personality. So I don't know if that's a net win or a net loss for him. A political consultant or a public relations specialist might know better than me whether each of these participants is going to benefit or suffer in the long run for having participated in the debate. But generally speaking, we can understand the format to be about trying to make your opponent look bad, or put another way, establish higher credibility, which is basically the same thing. Trying to make your opponent look bad is a strategically tight line to walk because it can backfire, make you look bad by being a bully or making some sort of mistake, and then you got the gotcha on you. But it's what this format is incentivizing because there really isn't anything determining a winner other than what impression the audience at home gets about who is more credible.
Someone who's illegally entered the United States, not a criminal, but somebody who illegally entered the Capitol
Not
is.
according to the Supreme Court of the United States.
The Supreme Court has said that anyone who enters the United States
The
illegally
Supreme
is not a
Court,
criminal.
and we can jump to future claims.
Can I get the case site?
We can jump to 20. You want to get the case?
The case site, please. You said the Supreme Court
The
said,
citation of the case.
Yes, that entering the United States illegally is not a crime.
It's called Arizona versus United States 2012. Go look it up.
Pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
A lot of debate formats will have a section of the debate where the debaters are directly addressing the audience, and another section of the debate where they're directly speaking to each other, usually asking each other questions. We call this section in academic debate cross-examination. Cross-examination has the biggest impact on who an audience perceives to be winning the debate. It's because they get to make a direct side-by-side comparison between the two sides, where even if you don't know about the topic or understand the issues being discussed, even if you don't speak the language that the debate is in, you can make intuitive judgments about who looks nervous, who's stammering or confused or embarrassed, who sounds and looks like they're winning the debate. And as a result, a lot of the strategy in doing well in cross-examination comes down to what's going to make you look and sound like you're winning the debate. There's some general tips for cross-examination that a lawyer might give. Like, don't ask a question you don't already know the answer to, or don't let somebody answer your question with a question. And all of those are good and useful tips. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into things that are more specifically for our purposes. There are 4 useful strategies for cross-examination questions. Another way to think of this is there are 4 goals that your questions should be trying to accomplish. We're going to go over these in order of least useful to most useful, which is incidentally also easiest to do to hardest to do. Now remember, when we're talking about usefulness, we're talking about that in relation to our win condition, which is establishing higher relative credibility. The easiest and least useful goal behind asking a question is getting clarification on something.
I really just more want to get an understanding. When you say pro-criminal, what do you mean? Can you tell me a little bit more about your journey?
Can you please describe why you think Trump is supporting ethnic cleansing of Gaza just because he wants to take over the land there?
These questions can be pretty detrimental to ask in a debate because they can frame you as not understanding something in the debate that maybe your opponent does understand. It can especially be bad for your relative credibility if the audience at home understands the thing that you need to ask for clarification on. But what that does to the discourse in the debate is that it removes the incentive for people to get clarification on what the other side means. And that makes it easier for people to misunderstand each other and not talk about the same thing because neither side wants to admit what they don't know or they don't understand.
You come here and say all this bullshit about how Americans are lazy. Why? You push your left-wing politics.
I never said Americans are lazy.
I don't know why you say this.
I never said Americans are lazy.
Yes, you are. You're saying immigrants have to come into this country so they can do jobs that we don't want to do. That's exactly what you said.
When did I say it?
Oh, really?
When did I say it?
The second reason you don't want to ask these questions is because it lays down a red carpet for your opponent. It gives them a platform to talk about their favorite issue and to wax poetic about it for as long as they can and to really make sure the audience is clear on this point and really make sure the audience has that in the forefront of their minds. Add new evidence and new examples, and even if you get the gist of it very quickly, they can say, hold on, I'm trying to answer your question, let me finish.
Criminal. He's been indicted for 88 different criminal offenses in 4 different jurisdictions by 5 different grand juries. He was convicted himself on 34 different criminal offenses by a jury of his peers. Okay. But let's park that for a moment.
Okay.
Separate to his own crimes, when confronted with the crimes of others, or the alleged crimes of others, for example, a Chinese crypto billionaire called Justin Sun, who was being investigated for market manipulation, Trump dropped the case, invited him to the golf course, invited him to the White House,
plenty of examples,
and the guy invested $70 million in Trump's cryptocurrency.
So what I want to ask you this.
That's pro-crime in my view.
With that said, these questions still make our list because if you don't understand something and it seems really important, you probably have to ask. It's going to hurt your credibility a little bit, but you don't really have much of a choice. That's why listening is probably the most important skill in debate. Effective listening is going to reduce the chances that you're in these positions in the first place. You especially don't want to end up in a position where the audience has listened to your opponent better than you have.
Given we're on the sense of the Constitution, and you asked the question, what is the proportion of immigrants in this country? What proportion of the population is foreign-born?
It's very difficult to measure because the actual actual projections.
Trump
How do
pardoned
pardons
him.
that probably shouldn't have happened turn into pro-crime?
So you've agreed that they shouldn't have been pardoned.
The next most important goal in asking a question in debate is establishing control. That can mean moving the focus of the debate to an area where your arguments are strongest. It can also mean just wasting your opponent's limited time. An audience is really likely to mentally list the most important issues in the debate in the same order as what issues had the most time spent on them in the discussion. They're more likely to leave the debate thinking about the topic that was talked about for 40% of the debate over a topic that got talked about for 4% of the debate. And you want to, as often and as consistently as you can, shift the focus over to that area where your side is strongest. You can see Mehdi do this a few times in the debate. He even gets called out for it.
People should not have the right to ignore our borders and our laws.
What about those
to
of us who
come
don't
here.
ignore the borders? Should we get to stay?
Of course.
But he says we shouldn't.
Well, I'm not debating him.
You kind of are because you're all together on this.
No, I'm debating you.
Okay.
What you did
Yeah,
is
please.
you entertained my hypothetical, but then instead of sticking to the point of the Constitution, you said, well, how would you bring about your hypothetical? And then when
Because
I
you missed out the part where the Constitution's quite hard to change.
Hold on. I understand that. I gave you
I also wanted to get a sense of where you
Yeah.
are, and you're a great replacement guy. So that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, and you're a real good journalist because you don't talk to people who identify as like a political ideology. I mean,
But calling it out doesn't accomplish much because it doesn't win back that time that you could have spent talking about something else. Next up, and really importantly, is drawing concessions. Some people also call this setting a trap. It's really difficult for your opponent to walk back something that they said earlier in the debate without severely hurting their relative credibility. But why would they have to do that? Why would they say something that's gonna hurt them? Well, you need to ask the question in such a way that when they're answering it, they think it's going to benefit them. But they later find out that it actually benefits you more. The way that that happens is usually when the arguments share a premise. Any argument you want to make will rely on a bunch of premises that you need to convince an audience of. Now, your opponent can disagree with any of these premises, but if you and your opponent both agree on a premise, it's really unlikely that the audience is then going to be skeptical of that or decide on their own, actually, I don't agree with this. Even if they did, it wouldn't help your opponent because they are in agreement with you over that. So how do you get a good debater to say something in a debate that you can use against them? Well, A, it should probably be establishing the premise of an argument that you haven't made yet in this debate. B, it probably shouldn't be easy for your opponent to guess where you're going with this or why you're asking. C, most importantly, your opponent should have reason to believe that the answer that they're about to give is going to help them with their argument. Remember with the first strategy where if you ask a clarifying question, your opponent can have a red carpet laid out for them to go on and on about something? You want to make them think that that's what's happening, but actually they're kind of digging their own grave. In a later video, we're going to talk about what makes an argument good. I have a model for this. It's the Kasravi model. I'm Kasravi. And that is relevance, accuracy, significance. These are the three aspects of any argument that make it a good argument. And anytime you're refuting an argument, you are either saying it's not relevant to what we're discussing, or it's not accurate, or it's not significant. In this case, you both agree on the accuracy of one concept. They relate that argument to issue X. You relate it to issue Y. If you can show that issue Y is more significant than issue X, then you're probably winning that debate, even though you agreed on the accuracy of one of the premises. After the Jubilee video came out, I bought and read Mehdi Hasan's book on debate, which I thought was okay. And in it, he talks about how important it is for you to know your audience. So if you're debating in front of a devoutly Christian audience, maybe you should quote the Bible. If you're debating in front of a conservative audience, you should cite conservative sources. Mehdi Hasan does that in this debate.
A judge, a Reagan-appointed judge, sentenced to 20 years in prison. They've been convicted, in many cases, by Republican judges.
Oh.
No, in fact, Ronald Reagan, who's a president I wasn't a big fan of until Donald Trump came along. Now people like Reagan look good in comparison. Reagan said in 1986, our country is a nation of immigrants. Our immigrant heritage is our strength. He gave an amnesty to 3 million undocumented migrants. He understood the value of immigration. So I'm with Reagan.
One way you could enhance this strategy is in asking first, why would it be important if an argument was grounded in scripture? And then once they go on and wax poetic about why that's important, you can say, well, we can look to Leviticus, Matthew. Or you could say, what is it that you think makes conservative think tanks like the Heritage Foundation credible? That's going to make it much harder for them to just bat away a Heritage Foundation study. They might say, well, I haven't read that study. Doesn't matter if you've read it. You told me that this was really credible, didn't you? So you've already locked them into that. Another way of doing this is if your arguments share impacts. In debate, an impact is a predicted outcome that gives your argument significance. Now, imagine your opponent has a bunch of arguments, and some of them relate to environmental impacts, and some of them relate to economic impacts. You also have a bunch of even better arguments about the environment. They go up, they make their arguments, you go up, you make your arguments. What they're probably going to do now is shift the focus over to the economic arguments, right? And to try to focus on the impacts that they have more unique control over. But what you could do is before you make your arguments, ask them, why is the environment so important to you? They will then give a long, winding answer about how significant it is, making it way harder for them to now shift the focus over to the economy after they've said how important the environment is.
I think he's cracking down on free speech, like the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil, who was
just released from prison by a judge saying his First Amendment rights were violated.
And I agree with the judge, and I disagree with Trump deporting them. But I think that's more a matter of free speech and not the Constitution.
I think that's pedantry at this moment. I think you've conceded that he is cracking down on free speech, which is the First Amendment. So he is defying the Constitution. So it's a pleasure to be in agreement with you, sir.
All right, pause. You've been voted out by the majority.
This is probably the closest thing we have to an advanced strategy in cross-examination. And if you can do this consistently well, you're going to be outstanding at cross-examination, and you don't really need to learn anything else. But there is one more rewarding, maybe more difficult goal for our questions. That is embarrassing your opponents.
Islamic Republic in Iran is using them as a tool.
What has Iran got to do with this?
As a tool for their Islamic expansion.
When did the Islamic...
Because they don't...
Hold on. When did the Islamic Republic of Iran... You're Iranian American,
yes.
I believe.
Yes, I am.
When was the Islamic Republic of Iran founded?
1979.
When was Gaza occupied by Israel?
Well, the very
67.
first time. 67, yeah.
So, can we do the maths together?
If you notice a contradiction in something your opponent has said, you can get up and you could announce to the audience that this contradiction has been made. And that's good and effective, but when you do that, the audience is looking at you. And while they're looking at you, your opponent is sitting there trying to think of how they're going to get out of this. And maybe they find some way to do it. But if instead you ask your opponent a question that forces them to acknowledge this contradiction, everyone is looking at them and they get to see that oh shit realization on their face. And when we're talking about these debates turning into clips and sound bites, these are the things that the clips and sound bites are of. And every debater gets owned by whatever video is an example of this. Before we look at how the people in this debate attempt to do this, let's take a look at an example of this being done well in the movie My Cousin Vinny. Every lawyer, every judge loves My Cousin Vinny, and it's pretty much universally agreed that it's a masterclass in cross-examination. In fact, Merrick Garland once opened an opinion he wrote on a case by saying, in 1992, Vincent Gambini taught a masterclass in cross-examination. Imagine you're Vinny Gambini and you notice a contradiction with the testimony that one of the witnesses for the prosecution is given. What you could do is you could talk to the jury and you could say, the witness claims that they know it was 5 minutes from when the defendants went into the store to when he heard the gunshots, because that's how long it took him to cook breakfast. But he said he had grits, and it takes 15 minutes to cook grits, not 5 minutes. That's an okay argument, but there's a lot of ways out of it. The witness could say, oh, I actually had something else. I was misremembering. Or, I started cooking the grits earlier. You didn't say you started cooking it earlier. Yeah, my bad. Or they can say, I like my grits really undercooked. How are you going to prove that they don't? I used instant grits. Do you have evidence that they didn't? But what makes it way more effective as a question is that this guy doesn't have time to come up with a strategy. The audience is watching them panic and stammer and hurt their relative credibility, which is what makes it so effective.
Do you remember what you had?
Eggs and grits.
How do you cook your grits? You like them regular, creamy, or al dente?
Just regular, I guess.
Instant grits?
No self-respecting Southerner uses instant grits.
How could it take you 5 minutes to cook your grits when it takes the entire grit-eating world 20 minutes?
I don't know. I'm a fast cook, I guess.
In a debate that's being evaluated on relative credibility, it's really rewarding to embarrass your opponent. With that said, I don't think this should be your plan in a regular debate. The first and most basic reason for that is because your plan is just hoping that your opponents say something dumb or that they're bad at debate. And you shouldn't plan for your opponent to be bad at debate, because if they're good at debate, you lose. And if they were bad at debate, you probably didn't need to strategize in the first place. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how this presents itself in this debate and the problems around that. But first, let's really quickly cover some general tips for answering questions.
Do you, Mehdi, believe that the Constitution is important and good?
Overall, yes.
Do you believe that that Constitution can be eroded through democratic processes?
What do you mean by erode?
The original intention of the Constitution being destroyed through a purely, democratic or legal process.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay.
4 quick tips. 1. Anytime your opponent lays out a red carpet for you to elaborate on your strongest arguments, take them up on it. Give a long answer that maximizes your audience's understanding and focus on your strongest arguments. 2. If you're not sure how an answer is going to help you, give the shortest answer that you can get away with. 3. Answer questions with things that you've already said. The reason why this works is because, 1, it creates the impression that your opponent just wasn't listening or wasn't understanding, and it hurts their relative credibility. 2, if it's things you've already said, you're not giving them new ammunition that they could potentially use against you. The 4th and most important tip for answering questions in a debate is to learn how to confidently say you don't know something. Remember that the damage that gets done to your relative credibility when you're answering a question usually isn't the information in the answer itself, but it's the way you're answering it and the way that the audience perceives who looks and sounds like they're winning. There's no expectation or requirement for everyone to know everything about the issue. If you can confidently say, I don't know the answer to that, then you seriously diminish the amount of damage that someone's doing to your credibility when they ask you a potential gotcha question.
And a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that migrants since 1965 have raised wages and raised innovation.
Who's that by?
National Bureau for Economic Research.
No, hold on. That's where you publish studies. I'm asking
yes,
for
I didn't memorize the names of the authors.
With that said, the most rewarding way of answering a question in a format like this is the same as the most rewarding way of asking a question in a format like this, which is an attempt to embarrass the person that you're debating against. Now, earlier, I said that that is a big risk to take. The reward might be high, but the risk is also high because you could easily make yourself look bad or look like a bully or have something you said backfire on you. But what if that wasn't the case? What if we had the debate in such a way that you have an audience that simply by the fact that you are on the side of the debate that you're on will never lower their opinion of your relative credibility? Now the risk is pretty much eliminated, so the best strategy is to just maximize how many tries you're taking, how many swings you're taking at embarrassing the person that you're debating against. And so the debate just becomes context for a bunch of zingers and insults and gotcha moments.
I want to concern myself with why you care about what's happening in the U.S., first and foremost. Secondly,
I'm an American, you know.
You're an American citizen?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know how you got that, but fair enough.
So I would say that with Trump being anti-Constitution, I don't really care, to be quite frankly.
Okay.
Because in regards...
But listen to me. I am an immigrant. I'm speaking from personal experience.
Get the hell out.
I don't even like... Isn't that what America stands for? What does America stand for? So you hate what America stands for, not me.
I'm not even...
Are you a lawyer?
I'm very aware of
Are
it.
you a lawyer? Are you an economist?
I could be.
But
right?
are you?
I could be.
Are you?
I'm not going to tell you.
Are you?
I'm going to major in economics, right?
Are you an economist?
Conservatives are going to win in the room because they're the whole audience. Mehdi's probably going to win the greater court of public opinion because most people aren't as far right as the people he's debating against here. And at no point does any productive discourse actually take place. Notice how regardless of which side better represents your values, the longer this sort of exchange goes on, your brain goes from being woken up and excited by a fiery exchange of ideas to going, please just stop.
My point is, okay?
Nothing to do with crime. So far, you've agreed with me that these people are
Because you're
criminals.
derailing, dude. I'm trying to stay on track.
You literally sat down and asked me where I'm from. I think you derailed this conversation from the get-go.
I think you got offended by that, but I'm
not offended. I'm just wondering what it has to do with crime.
I'm always curious.
We're going to talk about immigration. Don't worry. Later on, you can come back.
I hope so.
Right now, you're doing a very bad job of making the case that he's not pro-crime.
I just
and
got
pro-criminal.
a round of applause. I could probably get another one actually if I asked for it.
Wow.
So I don't think I'm doing as bad.
Is this how you get rounds of applause? You sit in a room with 20 people who agree with you. Wow, amazing. Amazing. That must make you feel good.
You know what? I'm actually
20 people
glad
who agree
you're
with
getting
you
this
applauded you.
emotionally outraged right
Wow.
now. This is great.
I love it.
Do I have to say anything at this point?
Jubilee selects participants who are likely to behave this way and then puts them in a format that rewards this kind of behavior while more productive ways of having discourse on the same issues is actively punished. This is what we mean by the medium is the message.
I'm a deferred action of childhood arrivals. I was an illegal immigrant myself. I came here when I was 10. I'm what you would call a legal alien now. I didn't have any say on my parents. You know, immigration is it's an interesting issue because I do agree with you that
good to hear.
Everyone is an immigrant in the sense like.
Jubilee could have a surrounded video on any topic and have the end result look very similar to this. I personally feel that this format isn't enhancing discourse in some sort of digital public square, like the ad in the middle of the video that says to plug into their podcast and stay part of the conversation. I think there's better ways to structure a conversation. I think there's better ways to structure a debate. I think the format for these videos are, at best, misguided and irresponsible, and at worst, cynically and intentionally exploitative. Still, there's a lot left to be said about this video, and a lot that I have left to teach about debate. Let me know your thoughts so far in the comments, and subscribe to join me again soon as we continue our deep dive into argumentation and debate.